I'm not sure that robots still have that dexterity to put tiny little screws in phones.
Well, we have to get Jensen involved. How about the fact that he went 232 on the tariffs? That they decided that Nvidia should be exempt from the tariffs because of defense.
It is, but there were a lot of questions about what about all the servers that are shipped over here.
Michael Dell problem.
That include the Nvidia chips. So, and I know there's been some, I think Stacey Raskin had a take on that. I'm looking for it because people have been trying to determine, to your point, Jim, are Mexico-sourced AI servers, for example, exempt from tariffs? He says our initial read suggests yes.
Right,
but
that's my understanding.
What about
too.
Servers coming from Taiwan? What about servers coming from other places that obviously, yes, the chips are not subject to a tariff, but the servers are, right?
Game on. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, if you look at
what are we doing to our lead in AI as a result of raising the cost of everything?
And what happens to CapEx? Do you think CapEx gets revised lower by some of the hyperscalers?
Yes, I think so. But
everything gets more expensive, right? So if you're $80 billion on Microsoft right now, and you're sort of really looking at that as being the line you don't want to cross, and suddenly your costs go up by 10 or 15%.
NVIDIA at 87 reflects that. It reflects that there's going to be a decline in orders because they're selling it.
But again, I come back to the most important industry we have right now, which is the development of technology, where we're always ahead, and we are clearly ahead, or in AI for the most part, and yet we seem to be setting up a scenario in which it becomes more expensive to pursue that.
Also, we can create a shoe factory in this country? Is that what we're doing?
Only with pure robots. And do we want that? Isn't that what we decided that we would give them in return for cheap goods?
I didn't think this was about robots. I thought this was about returning dignity to the U.S. worker in the manufacturing industry.
It is. That's what is.
Well, robots don't care about dignity.
Well, you do get to build the factories, but yes, the new factories
you get to build the factories, and I guess you get to.
We have incredibly low unemployment. It's just that a lot of people feel that the jobs are not satisfying. That's a very, that's a subjective issue.
Imagine a roller coaster ride in the stock market world, where Nvidia's stock experienced a day filled with twists and turns. Nvidia, a leading tech company, emerged as a key player in Monday's trading extravaganza. The day started with heart-racing moments as the company's share price ricocheted between extremes, leaving investors on the edge of their seats. Let's dive into the adrenaline-pumping story that unfolded in the turbulent market environment. Welcome back, everyone, to Investocracy.
Talk about the semiconductors sector, because not only was this where we were getting all our growth, but obviously where some of the heaviest positioning was, and where we pulled back almost 30%, and where we really made no relative money since last summer. I mean, at what point, because again, semis kind of lead, right? At what point have they washed themselves out first? And what would you be looking for in price action, or what you want to hear from the companies around earnings?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. I think semis was up about 3% today. At least S&P 500 semis were. I would put them kind of in what I would call the core positioning bucket, which was the stocks were both high momentum and high growth in February when we hit this top. You would have had a number of semiconductor stocks in that basket. And, what we need to see is some stability there, frankly. I mean, those stocks are down almost 8% last week. We did get a bounce today. So I think I would put them kind of right at the vortex of kind of this positioning dynamic. Earnings, earnings are going to be the biggest wild card we've seen in a while. If you're a company here, you kind of have three choices, right? You either defend your numbers, and you better have a lot of evidence for why. You kitchen sink stuff. In that case, you better hope your stock is really washed out and there's money to buy. Or you have this middle ground where you kind of like punt it a little bit and talk about uncertainty. I'm not sure what the semi stocks are going to do, just because they're so exposed to tariff risk. So it's going to be unlikely that they're going to be able to successfully defend numbers. So they're going to kind of be in one of those other two categories, and I think that does open up some risk around earnings. But look, if the response to payrolls last week was any indication, fundamental data might not matter right now anyway. We may just be back to tariff headlines.
Tim mentioned semiconductors, and we've talked about the leadership. We also talked about how it's stalled out probably about 6 months ago. And you look at the SMH, what is it, 30-some% is Taiwan Semi, and it's Nvidia. And think about Nvidia. It went from just this story that people couldn't get enough of just a handful of months ago. Last year, they got 13% of their sales from China. Supposedly, the Chinese are just running around trying to get orders for the H20. This is a very dumbed down Hopper chip, right? They're trying to get them in before the export bans. So all of a sudden, you have a headwind potentially of China, a big chunk of Nvidia's sales, and then you go to and you think about, okay, are these hyperscalers going to cut that CapEx. So all of a sudden you have one of the major pillars of this trade over the last, call it 2 years or so, and it doesn't look so safe right here, despite it trading really cheap. And that's kind of the point. I think there's a handful of names out there like that might not be the leadership for a very long time. They might participate again when the generative AI trade gets kicked up again in a better environment, but it doesn't seem like that's going to save the market right now.
In the realm of stock market tales where drama meets data, Nvidia's stock took center stage in a performance that left investors both exhilarated and wary. Picture this. Amidst a whirlwind of trading activities, Nvidia's stock price defied gravity, closing the day with a 3.5% gain while dancing between a high of 7.9% and a low of 8.2% in the session. It was a day of wild fluctuations that could make even Wall Street veterans buckle up. Amid the chaos, as rumors swirled and market sentiments shifted like quicksilver, President Trump's remarks on potential tariffs rattled the tech industry, including Nvidia. The mere mention of additional tariffs on Chinese goods sent shockwaves, triggering sell-offs and causing tech stocks to stumble in the early hours of trading. But before going on with the video, are you into cryptocurrency? If so, check out our second channel, Investocracy Crypto. We bring you breaking news, expert analysis, and the latest trends in the fast-moving world of digital assets. Whether you're a seasoned crypto investor or just curious about the future of finance, we've got something for you. Click the link in the description to subscribe to Investocracy Crypto now. Don't miss out and stay ahead of the game. Now, let's get back to the video.
Joining us now is Dan Niles from Niles Investment Management. Dan, it's good to have you back on the show, and that's exactly where I'm going to start with you. Given what we have seen, this downdraft in stocks, would you be a buyer here?
Well, it depends on if you're talking long-term or short-term, but right now I think over the short term, when I saw the market down this morning, I started going in and doing things like shorting volatility where I thought we would hopefully see a pickup in a rally. Obviously, I wasn't expecting what happened intraday where the market goes from being down 4.7% to up 3.4 and then back to, below flat. But I think it shows you that unlike prior drawdowns that you've seen, global financial crisis, you're not going to fix the problem in a day because you've accumulated tons of bad mortgages. You're not going to fix COVID because it's a global pandemic in a day. You're not going to fix the tech bubble meltdown because you overinvested for 5 years back in the late 1990s. This you can literally fix overnight if everybody resettles the tariffs, because this is a self-inflicted wound. And that, I think that's what you saw with that move from down 4.7% in the S&P to up 3.4. And so I think what that does is it makes it so that in the near term, the path of least resistance is probably higher. Now, if you look long term, the one thing that brought me into this year, if you remember, one of my top 5 picks was cash. I had no Magnificent 7 in my top 5 picks. I was negative coming into the year before all of this stuff started to happen. And the issue was valuation, which nobody wanted to talk about who was bullish. And now everybody who used to be bullish is talking about valuations, which have dropped from 25 times trailing on the S&P down to 21. The problem I had was with inflation at these levels, the average S&P should be around 19 times. And so that's still another 10% lower from here. So I think the short term, I think you're going to see a bounce and you're going to see that continue. Longer term, I'm always focused on how much you're paying for things. And that's the thing that would keep me a little bit more cautious longer term.
However, in a twist worthy of a plot twist in a blockbuster film, news then emerged of a possible 90-day tariff pause, teasing investors with a glimmer of hope. Alas, the relief was short-lived as the report was debunked, leading to another round of uncertainty and market jitters. But before going any further, if you made it this far into the video, thank you. These videos take a lot of effort and time to make, so if you enjoyed them, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. This goes a long way in helping us grow. That said, back to the video.
Sounds like you think we're in middle innings or maybe getting towards the end if you're talking about maybe another 10% drawdown here for the S&P. So assuming that happens, assuming we fall further at some point here in the near term, we get even more washed out. Some of those technical levels are realized. Some of those valuation metrics that you just mentioned are realized. What would you be nibbling at first?
Well, I think it's very company specific. So I think, there are certain names that I went into recently. But the big thing I would focus on is which companies are generating a lot of cash, which ones tend to pick up market share during recessions. Those are the types of names that you want to be in, because if you're in stuff where, well, 10 years from now, it's going to be a big market, you're going to get absolutely murdered if you get into a recession. And so that's the stuff I would avoid, I guess, in that scenario. And don't forget, even if you go back to the global financial crisis, when the S&P was down 57% from peak to trough, you had 11 rallies in the S&P 500 of 10% each. 11 of 10%. And I guarantee you're going to get, or you can't guarantee, but it's highly likely, given what happened the last time, that you're going to have stuff like that happen again, and you're going to have the bullish analysts come out yet again and tell you how the market's going to be up 20%, trying to ignore valuations. But I think until you have the economy settled down, you want to stay in the cash generative names, profits today, not 10 years from now, where the multiples discount the risk. And I think the AI trade, now that you've reset some of these valuations a lot lower, those are some of the names you can go back and look at, and that's some of what we did today.
As the curtain falls on this gripping chapter of Nvidia's stock saga, the question lingers: what lies ahead for this tech giant? Despite the bumpy road, there are glimmers of hope and potential growth opportunities on the horizon. If you're considering stepping into the stock market arena, Nvidia might just present an intriguing option worth exploring. Keep an eye on the horizon, analyze the trends, and make an informed decision. The stock market, much like life, is a roller coaster of emotions and opportunities. What's your take on this riveting Nvidia story? Finally, if you would like to know what companies like Nvidia have been up to these past few days, go ahead and click on the next video on your screen. See you there.